Be advised, suspect is armed and considered extremely dangerous.
Welcome to the Safety Doc Podcast with author, radio host, and nationally recognized safety expert, Dr. David Perodin. Join us each week as we discuss the best and most bizarre practices in safety preparation and crisis response. Follow Dr. Perodin on Twitter at SafetyPhD. And remember, the truth will keep you safe.
Hey everybody, it is your good friend Dr. David P. Perodin from down here in the historic North Star recording studio. And yes, I did get a haircut today, so I think it looks spectacular. Also kind of signifies that spring is here, 50, 60 degree weather. So I am completely ready for that. So our show today, I haven't done a show for quite a while. And I wanted to do one just for an update, and also to kind of check out the video and audio. I was messing around and I needed to get this calibrated again. But welcome to everybody who is here, All Pro Leventon, Vanessa, our good friend Zippy. So thank you for stopping by. So yeah, kind of big news here in the world of the historic North Star recording studios. So I have made the decision to retire, I guess, from part-time university teaching. So that decision was communicated between me to the university this week, and I will formally kind of let that news out over the next couple of weeks. So, but kind of winding back, it was 23 years ago when I taught my first university class, and I'm going to talk about what it was like then, how I got into that as, I wouldn't say a side hustle, but kind of a parallel professional endeavor, and then also, what changed over the 23 years, and I think some things will probably surprise you, and also why I'm exiting now. So the first thing is, I started 23 years ago, and I was working at the time at basically in Wisconsin, there are school districts, right? And then there's the Department of Public Instruction in between. There are these 12 organizations called CSAs, Cooperative Educational Service Agencies, and they typically help out the smaller districts with various needs, from driver's education to special education. So the one that I was working at the time was only a few blocks away from my house. It still is. My house hasn't moved, and the CISA has not moved. But some people who were working there were also teaching part-time classes on the weekend at that site. So there was a classroom there. And then back when this started, so 23 years ago when I started teaching, it was a requirement in Wisconsin for educators to have 6 credits, I think, every 5 years. Yeah, that was the rule. So to keep your teaching license, you had to take classes. And there was definitely a niche market for classes which specifically addressed areas like transition, for example, teachers, how to help high school students transition into post-secondary and what that looks like for your special education paperwork and so forth. So I was able to, that was my first class, a transition class. And where I worked, they supported that. They wanted people to step into the instructor roles. So then I don't remember this process exactly clear how it went, but I met with the representative from the university, and then they talked about what it would entail for me to become a faculty member, part-time faculty member. And so I completed that. I mean, it wasn't like a real strenuous process. but then I had to design the curriculum and align it with state standards. So I did all of that, right? Like none of this stuff existed. So I'm like, I'm going to teach a class on transition because I was working in that capacity and I knew quite a bit about it. I remember there was a program in Microsoft, I forget what it was, Publisher, I think, where you could do trifolds. So I made my own trifolds and would print them off and get them out to school districts, right? So, and in those days, everything was in person. So people would have to enroll, and then I would teach the class on Saturdays. I don't know, 5, 6 Saturdays over the fall. So when I started to teach, everything was basically paper at that time. So I had milk crates, yes, actual physical milk crates, and for each class session. So I would have all the handouts copied and probably like 8 to 12 students. So, the milk crate for class number 1, when that was done, you get all the handouts and materials that I would use. And of course, there were PowerPoints and things like that. But this was really kind of before the days of like Blackboard and Moodle. And even if those things, kind of did exist, they weren't very kind of reliable back then. So these were all in-person classes. And I remember then in the room right next to me after I'd be done with the first class, and that milk crate, that plastic milk crate would go on the floor, and then I would pick up the second one for the next class. And when I was done, then they would just stack them all and get them ready for the next year. I'd update the materials and have my milk crates. Every class would come in with a milk crate. So I have Vanessa say, hey, I still have my milk crates. Yeah, I have them. They've all been repurposed into other uses now, but yep. So back then when I started, everything, was in person, and everything was, I shouldn't say everything, most things were like paper handouts. And I was pretty confident, but I was also nervous because the people I was instructing were all older than me. And in the last few years, it hasn't been that way. It's like everybody I instruct is younger than me. But so I got through my first class, and I just remember how excited I was. And you had to fill out like all the paperwork, like the student's name and their like student identification number and their grade and all that stuff, and like postal mail it to the university. There wasn't any online submission of grading, stuff like that. So that's how I started out. And the university I was with was the Turbo University in La Crosse, Wisconsin. It's a private university in La Crosse, Wisconsin, along the Wisconsin River, but they had these partnerships where you could teach at satellite locations, again, just 2 blocks from my house. And I really appreciated that. So I expanded my courses, and then also the university had certain classes that they approached me and asked if I would instruct. One was inclusion of students with disabilities in the reading program. And then I really kind of took hold with their educational leadership program, which was for licensure for superintendent, director of instruction, director of special ed, principals, and started in that when it was first brought to the university, which is interesting because I am the only person there in that program who was there from the start. When that kicked off, I don't know, maybe 20 to 21 years ago. It wasn't there like right at the start. I think there was a year or two I was doing some other teaching before I got brought into that program. So yeah, that, and at the same time, I was also teaching for the University of Phoenix, and that actually was a very good experience. I taught a couple of different stats classes. Phoenix was very popular back from maybe like 2000, I don't know, 3 or to maybe like 2010. I remember teaching a student during Hurricane Katrina. She was in my stats class, and she had to keep evacuating further north. So like she would get to a shelter somewhere, and she'd be like logging in and saying like, hey, like here's where I am. And that class was like all online. And I'd be like, whoa, like you don't have to, we can work something out here. We can delay some of the assignments, but she was pretty intent on keeping up with the classes. Probably made a lot of sense because everything else was all chaotic around her. So um, there was actually a newspaper that did an article about how she stayed with the class even though like her whole life was turned upside down by Hurricane Katrina. But um, so what I taught for Phoenix, it was, I don't know, maybe like 6, 7 years, and when it ended, they had some kind of program realignment, and that was just kind of the end of it. I would have stayed with them. Uh, they had shorter classes, so when I taught with Phoenix, um, their classes I think were like 8 weeks long, and their curriculum was already established. They had a very high military enrollment, so I think they had contracts, I'm guessing, um, for students in the military to pick up their various degrees and things like that. Um, but yeah, I had a good experience with it. So, and then I taught with a couple other universities. One was Grand Canyon University, and I forget what the other one, but I mean just like one or two classes. But the Turbo, I instructed more than 100 class sections since I had started 23 years ago. So that that's high. That's almost quasi full time. In addition to like everything else that I was doing, so this was always part time. So when you're in education, you're working in educational administration. Uh, the Board of Education and like your superiors kind of encourage you to keep doing this because it gets you connected up with potential people who might come to the district as seeking employment, and it just puts you in a good spotlight, and it allows you to kind of engage in this professional network. So really a great experiences. Met incredible people. I was able to develop for the most part my own curriculum, especially once I got my PhD. And I think that was right around 2016. And then the door open to teaching even higher level classes and kind of like the terminal level classes. And then I was given full reign to develop the curriculum and align it with the state and national standards and all of that. So that's one thing. Once you get a PhD, it unlocks some doors. Um, so I had, over 100 course sections, and there would be some years I had to go back because I had to go back through my tax records to kind of find like the classes and really like how much income I was making off of teaching, and then I could kind of figure out the number of classes from that, and then also obviously my files and things like that. But um, so yeah, it averaged to maybe most years it was about 4 classes, but sometimes some years it would be like up to 8 classes because enrollment would be very strong. They would split a section, so you teach 2 classes in fall, 2 classes in spring, and 2 classes in summer. And then there were also a few standalone classes that I built that were offered kind of at different times, and those typically fill up. I rarely had a case where a class never ran because of enrollment, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. So, but yeah, the PhD definitely allowed me to open doors, and then really use that for 10 years to kind of have the most, I guess, the fun in teaching. And I would tell my students, when I was teaching, especially in person, and that's something we'll get to a little bit, I'd go to the university on Saturdays, and it's 90 miles away. So to get up very early, get things up. So usually by a little after 7, I would be in my classroom and have my materials. And at that point, like Moodle was integrated, which is an online platform, and you had your things saved to your drives. There wasn't a lot I had to bring over with me, but I would tell my students at the start, like, I'm going to be like a little bit like Robin Williams in, Mrs. Doubtfire, like very animated and kind of over the top. And I'm like, that is just my style. So you'll get used to it. It's not a performance, but it is the way that if I'm sitting in where you're sitting, I would want my instructor to be that way. I'd want this to be fun and energetic. And I had high standards and a lot of rigor. So I would bring in, for example, an actual drone I borrowed from my neighbor, and have it in the classroom for this case study, which I think I had shared before. If like a missing student, someone offers a drone, like, what would you do? Would you accept a drone or not? But so a couple of things looking back, one of the transitions is everything paper to nothing paper. Um, the only thing I would bring in usually, it might be one page agenda that I would just work off of. So there were no handouts toward the end. So big change. And in Wisconsin, around 2012, somewhere around there, something called Act 10, which changed teaching requirement and basically issued lifetime licenses. And that then was also the end of these classes, like the transition class I taught, because educators didn't need to go and 6 credits every 5 years. But the university program, the educational leadership program I instructed in, and still instruct in, I have one more class to teach this summer. That was gaining traction because more people were seeking administrative licenses, because it was a way also to move up the salary scale and to open up opportunity for compensation once Act 10 had passed. So those programs had the educational leadership program to become a principal, superintendent, special education director became pretty popular. So again, the first thing is going from paper handouts and those milk crates over to electronic files and things online. Now, I was fortunate because I was able to teach in person for most of my career. Now, Phoenix was all online, and Phoenix was kind of like its own thing. But I'm talking my primary parallel university job, part-time job. So most of that was done face to face on the weekends, and that was really what brought me to life. The university started to transition away from that for, I think, a couple of reasons. One is they saw other universities doing it. Students were giving more pushback, saying, "Hey, I don't want to drive 3 hours Saturday to class and then 3 hours back," and I kind of get that. Having taken my own courses for administrative leadership and my doctoral program, I would say 90% of all the courses I took were face to face. But the university was shifting away from that, and to the point now where it's largely pivoted to an online program. So there are certain things you can do online in teaching, but it is not the same as in-person experience. I always love the in-person parking and walking up to the university, and the big heavy door after my key card, cleared me to go in, and walking up and setting up my room. There was just something kind of magical about that, this pristine 100-year-old building with extremely articulate woodwork and actual chalkboards. And so, but yeah, to be in front of a screen and to go into Zoom and put students in their little groups and do that for 6-8 hours on a weekend, that just doesn't have the same feel to it. So, but that's kind of everywhere. I'm not singling out the university. That's just the way that education has become for educational leadership. So the second thing was compensation for teaching at the university level. So let me go back here to Zippy. So Zippy's saying, he also talks about how he needs an animated voice and cadence to keep people awake during his lectures. Oh no, they stayed awake. But I think one of the things I took into teaching from being a student for so long, having a master's degree and a doctoral degree, was the instructors that I guess liked the most were the instructors that were animated and told stories and moved around the classroom, right? And I still remember them to this day. So I wanted to do that. And that's my natural style anyway. So compensation in post-secondary. I think when I started 23 years ago, I probably made um, about 80% of what I make now. So it was pretty stagnant over 23 years. Uh, that, and that's a little bit surprising, just considering, right, inflation, because what you could buy 23 years ago, obviously, versus today. But when you teach in a part-time role, those salaries or that compensation package typically stays the same almost year to year. So that is something too, where if you're doing this for a source of income, it's really not going to, work out for you. Now, for me, because I enjoyed this, it was invigorating. The income did a couple things, which I'm starting to see now as I get close to full retirement. So one is um, having 23 years of that additional W-2 income um, offered a pretty nice bump in Social Security retirement. So, any of us, you can go online and check your Social Security. Let's hypothetically say it'll be there in 10 years. Because I had those 23 years of additional W-2 income, it provides a nice bump in that figure. I also think that the money I earned, because it was always extra, it did allow me to pay my house off faster, my mortgage. So over that span, I earned enough to pay off. I mean, to probably like buy my house and to buy my cars, like, over that 23 years. So from a fiscal standpoint, it was never money to live on, but because it was additional money and because it was W-2, and over 23 years, it had a nice impact on Social Security, and then also things that I was able to do, like pay off the house faster. So that worked out. That worked out really well. So Vanessa is sharing. I do have lots of nostalgia for chalk and talk at the blackboards. Yeah, I agree, Vanessa. So at the university, they gave a specific type of chalk because the boards, were like 100 years old, and I think that's mostly those. In the last few years, it's all smart boards and stuff like that now, interactive. But so, whoa, there's a message. Let me see. I rarely get messages. So, all right. Hey, thank you. So, yeah, I think you need. There was something about holding a piece of chalk, and I would buy these better dry erase markers off of Amazon, the fatter ones that were easier for people to see. When you're drawing the dry erase markers, just aren't that good. So I would take snapshots of what I put up on the screen or on the chalkboard. So I have those somewhere, and then I would share them back up with students, the notes that we would take during class. But there was just something very magical about driving over, parking in the university parking lot, walking through the well manicured grounds and this incredible building. I mean, that building I taught in, and there's a lot of buildings there, but and then, like, when I would be done, pack up, and drive home. And there were a lot of times the weather would be great. So I'd be driving home with the windows down, it's a 90-mile drive on the interstate. And it'd be like 80 degrees. And I'd have the tunes up, and it was just like the end of a really complete, fulfilling day. So I will miss that. Every time I went back and forth, I kind of, was like, hey, there's going to be a time when this is going to end, and it's probably sooner than later. And the last class that I taught in person, I had to leave early because that's when I had bacterial pneumonia. So 2 hours in, I had to be like, that was it. So, but it was really invigorating for me, and I met a lot of great people. We did just I wrote my own case studies, everything I did, like I developed everything, and I had high expectations, and I think people responded well to that. They raise themselves up, and so. But again, compensation these days is not going to bring anybody into part-time teaching. So let me go over here to the chat a little bit, and I'll come back. But thank you, everybody, for posting. I appreciate that you're here. I value this. Zippy is saying, academics and corporate is locked in unless you know the higher ups. Maybe, where I'm at, I don't really experience that. And again, I'm a part-time faculty member, and I've been for 23 years. But Vanessa is saying, I'm in the process of buying this home. I've rented for 60 years. Congratulations. All paperwork, etc. is, and the closing lawyers are working, and the work is almost complete. That's great news. Vanessa is saying, I gave talk and talk at the Northeast Convention of the MAA. The professors who attended and other teachers told my professors they truly appreciate it, a non-Microsoft PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't give many PowerPoint presentations. I had some, because if we're going through like school funding, right, I put my own presentation together, but it'd be like 5-6 slides, and I'd be like, okay, here's, and they had it on their devices and things like that too. But that is yeah, that is a good point. I had one group once. It was I forget what the activity was, and you had like 15 minutes to do your presentation. So I had it outlined. It might have been different disability areas. You have to describe it, what the criteria was, and how you might do professional development around it, whatever. So one group, I'll never forget this, like 4 or 5 years ago, they did a presentation. They had 100 slides in 15 minutes, 800 PowerPoint slides. So, and I was like, whoa. So after that, I had to be very kind of explicit with people and say, like, yes, you can't have more than 15 slides because you're going to lose people. The other thing, you have to kind of teach people when they present. That was another thing I had to spend a lot of time on, is to demonstrate. I would usually present also. Like, I would pick a topic and I would sit down. If I assign groups to case studies, I would sit down and be with a group and work with them through a case study, and then be with another group. So to be like involved in it, responding to discussion questions and things like that myself. If we have 3 articles that you were bringing to class and that you were submitting ahead of time in the Moodle, which is this electronic portal, about contemporary things in schools in the state that you wanted to talk about, I would do it too. I'd submit my articles and talk about them. So I think you have to be effective, you have to be not only present, but be a participant as far, or in addition to being an instructor. So we talked about number 1, going from all paper to all electronic. Number 2 is compensation in part-time hasn't really changed. So it's literally within a couple $100 per class of what I was paid when I started 23 years ago. Number 3, the gradual loss of the traditional in-person experience. And I've shared this before, and I really opine about this and think and have nostalgia and miss that, because there are some courses that I taught online, and I thought I did a very good job with those, part asynchronous, part synchronous. But I would then see those same students in person for 2 other classes. So I already knew who they were. The online course was usually like in the middle of that sequence. So if I had a name, right, I already had that student in the class and knew them. But now, again, sitting here, I just think I've lost excitement to come down and be like, yes, it's going to be a Saturday, and I'm going to be sitting here with the lights on and the camera and teach for 6 or 8 hours. And granted, like, some of that time you're teaching, some of the time students are in their own Moodle groups doing their own thing and stuff like that. So, hey, it's our good friend Z Question. Hey, buddy. So that was another kind of pivot which we've seen to online instruction. I just think so much happens in face to face, and that's not predicted. And it would be amazing to have people from large districts, like a Milwaukee district in Madison, something like that, and then somebody who's from a district where K-12 is all in one building and it's like 400 kids, and then mix them all together. And how would you handle this and this and this? So that was fascinating because it wasn't just like the large districts would contribute those people to the smaller districts. That would be both ways that information would flow. So what are my feelings about it? I knew this day was coming, and I think the fall of 2024, that's when I had pneumonia. I had pneumonia twice that fall, and it really was hard to work, obviously during the week and do the classes because my energy level just wasn't there. And I just also wonder if part of that is out getting older, right? So I knew, I kind of sensed the end was near. I didn't necessarily think it would be this year. I was anticipating the next 3 or 4 years I would reach the last class, but the university had made a pivot over the last 12 months to more online instruction. And I was involved in the program redesign, which I appreciated. But after this past fall, I was on leave. I was on a medical leave and kind of recovering from some medical things this fall. I was just like, my time and my Saturdays are too valuable at this stage of life. I need this time. I mean, over the summer, for example, my oldest daughter is a college student, and we'll probably have her back maybe 1 or 2 summers, and that'll be it. My youngest is in high school. So, if the weather's good on a Saturday, I want to be able to say, hey, do you want to go to the basketball court and shoot hoops, or go and practice tennis, and not be in front of a screen, because those times are very finite. So, or things I might do with my parents, who are in their 80s, and so this whole thing of like, I think I accomplished everything that I really wanted to accomplish through teaching at the post-secondary level of being a part-time professor. It gave purpose to the PhD that I had. It let me, be animated and energized and creative and contemporary, and write journal articles and teach using, my books, right? So it gave a lot of purpose to those things. But again, there's a point, I think we reach this in different things in life, where you just look at where you're at, and is it enough? And does it still excite you? It's not a reflection on the university in a negative way. There'll be somebody else coming in, right, who was me 23 years ago, and they'll have their perspectives and energy, and they'll be much more fluent with a smart board than me, right? I have to be like, hey, who out there knows how to use this thing? And there's always some people, because they're using it in their classroom. So Vanessa shared, your books have been instrumental in my life. That's very kind of you to say. I appreciate that, Vanessa. Yeah, back there are my books, obviously, School of Errors and The Velocity of Information. And I use School of Errors as a text in one of my classes. And then it's interesting because I know there's another professor who uses it in a class at, I think, Emory University. I just found it because I was doing a search of my book, and it came up as like a required text for a university class. And I was like, I was trying to find the instructor. I couldn't find the instructor to touch base and say, hey, I would be glad to, do a little video live with your students if you're, referencing some of the book. But I wasn't able to find the instructor. Yeah, School of Airs has been fun too because that's the book where people reach out and say, they'll email me because it's not hard to find who I am, right? And somebody contacted me maybe like a month and a half ago, and they had listened to the audio version. And they shared, well, I had a free book on Audible, so I downloaded your book. I go, thanks. And they just said I really liked it, and they were an educator, but they just wanted to say how much they enjoyed it. And I said it's awesome because narrating is really a skill, and I think being the author of the book and narrating it brought something to School of Airs, but certainly the velocity of information being narrated by a professional actor, Ben Hawk, is at a whole different level. But people reach out, they'll send emails or they'll be on LinkedIn, and it's interesting how the books kind of reach people. And going back to like teaching, also there are people then that I've instructed who have become superintendents in the state or other states. And if I know, they're in certain positions, that I'll send them a letter congratulating them. But there are people who come back and say, these classes were some of the best and that I had, and then also people who are applying for positions and saying, hey, do you have some time? Can I, schedule time and we can talk? And can we schedule? I'm going to interview for this position, and I just want to get your ideas on what I'm going to talk about, what I'm going to present. And be like, sure, yeah, I'm glad to do that. So let's go for it. So I was always accessible, and when I ended class, I told people, hey, like on the syllabus is my phone number and my email. Not my university email, and that was there too, but like my regular email. So like, if you want to get a hold of me, you can, and it's going to typically be if something we covered in class or school safety comes up, or again, if you are interviewing or considering positions and you want to talk to me about them. And people took me up on that, which I think is a huge reflection of kind of the impact that the class has had. And just, of course, you're not going to contact an instructor if you didn't like them during class. So that really meant a lot to me too. And I remember one student was interviewing for a superintendent job, and he was just outstanding candidate. And I think we were either on the phone or like doing a Google Meet till like 11 at night, like before he interviewed for this position. He actually ended up with a different position, but, and we were going through things, and I was like really excited for him. I mean, I was like, and whoever hires you, they're getting a rock star. So, but again, so kind of my three things that I saw, one is, paper to electronic. The second is compensation didn't change. And classes now are largely online. And again, it's different. Maybe, again, it works for some people. It just doesn't work for me. So I had to make that decision. So I really, it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be to come to the point. I roughed out my resignation email, maybe like 4 months ago, and I just let it sit in the draft box. And I go in and revise it, and I mean, it's very tactful. There's no axe to grind or anything like that, but I had some very procedural steps, and they're like, hey, like I get my W-2 online for like the last 10 years, and since I'm leaving, I won't have that. So make sure that you change that so my W-2 is mailed to me at the end of this tax year, and then also if you could leave my email and my university access alive for like 60 days so I can kind of wrap things up with students after that last class and make sure I have everything in and kind of harvested from stuff that I've parked in Moodle courses or stuff like that. Just I can double check. But then it just became a pretty clear decision, and it was so part of it comes. I do these long walks. We have a nice a new subdivision coming in with a very nice walking trail, and it's about 6 blocks away. So that's been a nice area for me to walk. I actually did that today, and I would just think about things, kind of like I'm 54, so like where do I think my life will be in 2 years? Where in 10 years? Um, and I also like was asking, what do I want to accomplish um, professionally? And I don't really have anything left. I want to do, and I don't want to write another book. I don't want to open take on a new class or develop a new class. Like I've done that stuff, right? Um, and so I was like, you talk about purpose and agency, and I think that becomes difficult to define as you get older because as you leave a job, like some people are so tied to their job, they kind of stick with it because it's their purpose, right? That's how they define themselves. Like I am a professor, I'm a superintendent, or I am an engineer, or whatever it is. Um, and so they have a hard time kind of leaving that. And at some level, I will miss the ability, like my LinkedIn, where I just affiliate myself with the university because that's where I work, right? But that won't be there anymore. So that's a little bit of an odd feeling, but not a bad feeling because like everybody goes through that, right? Like, well, not everybody. I guess some people work forever or work till they pass away. But I think it's, I was thinking about these, let's say professional athletes, and you get to like age 30, 35, and you're retired. Like you're no longer that professional athlete, but it doesn't mean that you've necessarily changed. Or I was trying to study some people in those fields where you're exiting pretty early on, um, of how they make those transitions and get into things. But what this will do is it's not creating a void to fill. Um, it's creating an opportunity to kind of lay back and to take it easy, to sit out in my lawn chair on nice days, to get out there and to walk, to do more, kind of road trips. And um, plus, I mean, things teaching, because I haven't been in the classroom or in a district for a while, you start to lose touch with things that are going on. So, like some of my materials are older. They're like 10, 12 years old. They're still very good. I check everything before I deliver, but it isn't as contemporary as, for example, if somebody was actually doing this. So let me go over to check here. So Vanessa is writing, yes, change. What to do now? Yeah. Vanessa also shared, I turned in my DL in August, driver's license due to med reasons. That has been hard to realize. Yeah. I'm sorry about that, Vanessa. But yeah, so I think there is much health, though, professionally in exiting and kind of then figuring out what you want to do or not do anything at all, right? Um, because I've seen too many people become too locked to the profession and let it be their identity. And I also think it ages people. Like, I don't think the university work aged me because I really enjoyed it. It was invigorating, but I've seen people stay in kind of like high profile, high paying jobs, and they're my age and they look like they're 75 or 80, and they, just don't seem healthy. Like the stress has eaten them away. It's like an anode in a water heater, it's just deteriorating. And then I'm looking and be like, your best years are kind of gone. Even if you leave now, you are at the end of the span of probably being, physically fit and able to do the things that you want. So Um, yeah. So Vanessa's saying, you need to step out for a minute, see a new point of view. I'm about the same age and started riding a sport bike again. It's another community to hang out with. Yeah. And I thought about that. I mentioned it before, like of possibly getting an e-bike. And I was thinking too, I was pretty physically fit. Not that I'm not physically fit now, but to get back into some kind of working out. And we have a very nice fitness center which is built next to the hospital. It's a part of the hospital, but it's for the community, and they have a track and a pool and stuff like that, all indoors. So thought I can walk there from my house, maybe to get a membership and just focus on that. Um, I used to go like on Fridays in the morning to the library and bring some of my books with me, all these books that you never read, or even my own books, and have coffee, and there's kind of a lounge area with a fireplace. It's really nice, and sit down and just read for a couple hours. And I got so much enjoyment out of that. So just to go back, people also say, hey, like, do you want to be a mentor? Do you want to do volunteer work? And I'm like, not really. I don't really want to do that. I don't want to necessarily be in a position where I'm interacting with other people right now. I just want to step away from everything. And maybe, right, maybe I'll do that at some point again. I've had people approach me with like, you know, people I respect, very well established in the corporate field of, hey, let's team up and let's like do this project, and we'll start touring and get to different schools and presentations and programs, and I respect those offers. They're very generous. These people are phenomenal. I'm just like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be sitting in airports and granted, like while I'm up on stage and presenting to people, like that is super powerful. It's almost addicting. Like I just love that. But you know, and that's where I kind of think like it's almost like being an actor or maybe like a comedian. Like the audience really fills you and brings you to life. But then there's this whole other side, where all your downtime and travel and away from home and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I don't want to take on any of these projects, and I contemplated writing another book. But the books were hard work. It took a lot of time. Glad I did them. The citations, the quality, but not interested in doing another book. So no. So you're saying do some vlogs. Yeah, I could. I mean, like this, I enjoy. When I did the Safety Doc podcast, over 200 episodes, I was producing video. I would rip it in audio and level it and do the blog post. The problem with that is it wasn't sustainable and that was back before the days of like AI. So like you're writing out all of your blog posts, you just can't like, give points or just have it like auto generate it. And then I took down safetyph.com. I think I still own the domain, but nothing is out there. So I just get updates periodically that, hey, like it updated. I'm like, updated what? Like if you just go there, it like links you out to my Amazon page. But I will eventually give up safetyphd.com. I'll put it up for sale. I don't know when. Some people have contacted me over the years asking if I would sell it. So yeah, the university is every university class I taught, I dressed as you see me now. So this is actually the color of the university. So this would be one of the shirts I'd wear. And here's the university pin right here. A little hard to see. So I remember I was at in their presentation hall or their performance center. Just beautiful, by the way. And as I walked in, it was a faculty event, maybe like 15 years ago, and they handed me this pin. Whoa, wow. And I put it on my lapel. But that was something else. I always felt there was a level of prestige and a level of decorum with this position, even though I'm not a tenured level faculty. I was never on that path. Um, I always wore dress shoes, dress pants, a dress shirt with and my sport coat for every class that I taught. And it was just my way to honor the role and honor the university. And I thought the decorum was appropriate. And I also think people respond to that. Um, so I, it was always that. It's really the only reason I have, maybe 5 sport coats. It was solely just for, the university teaching. And I will miss that somewhat. I mean, actually, of getting out of the car and getting my backpack and here to be dressed like this, walking to the university, and walking up to the buildings, right? So, yeah, that was pretty cool. I want to go back um, sometime and either like do a guest lecture, like in summer, when I can have the windows rolled down. It's a nice drive and spend a little bit of time in the community. And maybe do that like one time and then kind of just move on. So was it I don't know if you have any questions for me. I'm glad to answer any questions. So this isn't formally out there. University is aware, and I have a class now that is wrapping up, and then I have one class in summer. And when that class is done, then I will be completely done. So, so let's see here. So Z is saying, I find it hard to talk about things on the mic in my videos, so it's just the sound of the raw engine. Yeah, it's funny how like people do like vlogs and stuff like that, and they just the camera up in their cars are going, "It's Ron Wayne, the Kentucky Batman." So it frees up time for me to drive to Kentucky and spend a couple days with my good friend Ron Wayne. I can stay outside in a tent or in my car. So whatever it takes. But yeah, Ron Wayne, and Mrs. Wayne. Oh my goodness! Wow, appreciate both you guys. Really do, very much. And yeah, so I'm not just kidding. I think in the last, two years basically of kind of the significant health issues I went through, having to completely do a sabbatical from all work and everything in fall and kind of recovering from that. And there are their channels, Ron Wayne, Mrs. Wayne. I think, and I've said this before, I think Ron Wayne has the absolute best audio, has tremendous video. All of his stuff is awesome. But the best audio for a firearms related channel. It's crisp. It's not overwhelming. It's just, he's just a great person, Ron and Misty. So, but big time respect for both of them. So there are their channels. So yeah, but I might, I don't know. I think you guys extended an offer one time of if I ever get down your way there. I think in Kentucky, to stop in. I would very much like to do that. So Ron's saying no. It's Missy saying no way. So, but we have a comfy couch. Yeah. That's also something I've thought about. Is I do want to get out and visit some people that I've met through YouTube or LinkedIn, or people that I just know that have moved away. So like Ron, Misty, like come down and into the Kentucky area. I know some people in Tennessee, some people in Florida. I've always wanted to get out to Gettysburg. I have many friends in Pennsylvania who they're always like, hey, stop out here. You can stay for a couple days. And as far as like Gettysburg, right? Like we go there every other year. So we'll just take you around and show you like what it is. And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, I'm not getting any younger. I I think these will be great things. So Ron and Misty, after 23 years and teaching 100 course sections, I have decided to retire from the university. Um, and yeah, a lot of highlights from that. With my class 2 years ago, we developed a a one-page guide. It was a case study. It was a student, Marcus, and the student Marcus in this case study had autism, and it was how you get a little scenario about Marcus. Then you develop an IEP goal, an individualized education plan goal, and then what the goal and the objectives would be and how it'd be measurable. And we did that as a class, and then I submitted it to FEMA as in their resource toolkit, and they accepted it. So it is the only IEP template out there for students with disabilities that FEMA has. And I thought that was a great accomplishment. So down at the bottom, I'm like, it was developed in this class, this date, and that's something I think I could do, is to develop. It wouldn't necessarily be a book; it'd be like a guide, and maybe look to market that. Probably pair up with one of the education publishers, because that doesn't exist anywhere out there. Goals, IEP goals related to school safety for students with disabilities, and people aren't doing it. They should be doing it. And I have a lot of good ideas with that, so I think I would be able to do that. I wrote a book. I think I talked about it. I wrote a couple of books. But I wrote a book called Past Infringement. And I live here in Portage, Wisconsin. And Portage had a military fort from 1824 to 1848. Jefferson Davis was stationed there. And it's like 2 miles from my house. I was a guide. I was actually the handyman there and rebuilt the well and stuff like that. So it was pretty cool. So, hey, look at this here. We wish you the best in all your endeavors. Yeah, and the thing is, Ron and Misty and everybody, it's kind of like there isn't a next. And this is probably the first time in life where, for me, there isn't a next. There isn't a next book. There isn't a next project that I'm taking on. So it does. It has a little bit of a awkward feel, but not a bad feel. And honestly, I'm just ready to be done. And I think by working, full time and doing the university at a quasi, almost full time capacity, and in parallel to that, I just think it depletes you, and there just isn't much there. And I could probably continue this for a while, and I could do it, but it's just the energy isn't there. I think it's moved by, it's passed me by, and I think that happens. And there's other people then that come in, right? You just see the cycle of life, this entropy or this torus, right? All the things I've kind of written about. And I also, at 54, I guess, which isn't that old, but it isn't young. And if I want to do things too that are just kind of on my own time, my own time frame, and not committed to anything, such as going to Gettysburg or Kentucky and Tennessee, or going down to Florida in winter and hang out with some friends while it's 0 here. I'm able to do that. I just want to spend a day out in my driveway waxing my Buick with the radio on in the garage. I can do that. Mow my lawn in 3 different directions so it looks like a baseball field from the road and edge it. I can do that. So one of the things also with teaching at the university level is there was always a high level of respect from students. I think part of that was the way that I carried myself kind of set the bar for that. But, people were very appreciative, very attentive. I think they knew how important things were. I was treated very well by my students. I have several gifts, like mugs and things that they had customized for me and stuff like that. that was something too, like I'd never had an experience in 23 years teaching in post-secondary when I was like, oh God, I'm glad this class is done. Right? I never once felt that way. Or like driving to the university and not feeling like just super energized. There were some nights, like even in the last couple of years, I mean, if it was a Saturday class, I had to leave here like at 4 in the morning. I would be like jazzed, and I sleep like an hour the night before because I was just ready to go. Um, and so like that passion, that energy, just really filled me up. But again, I think the health issue certainly. I I remember the day I went in, the last class I taught in person, which was November 2nd, 2024, and that was the class where I had severe bacterial pneumonia, and I was driving in, and I was just like forcing myself to stay awake, and I just had this. I always had this sense for my entire life. So if I'd be teaching, or I'd be teaching university classes and working full time as an administrator, and I'd be like, "Whoa, I got this is a big class or 2 classes," but I'd always be like, "I can do it. I know, like in 3 months, the class will be done and it'll be a great class. And between now and then, the magic will just happen. Something will spark up inside of me, and it'll empower me, and I'll be able to do it. The magic will be there." And I, I thought I could will my way through that November 2nd class. I thought, nope, I'll go there. I'll stop at the gas station and get some coffee and a donut on my way in, and I'll just will my way through it. I've always been able to do that, and it just wasn't happening. And when I got there, and I remember, like, it's supposed to be an 8-hour class, and so it starts at 8. By 10 o'clock, the department chair was teaching in a room next to me, and I left and I talked to him out in the hallway, and I'm like, dude, I said, I'm not well, and I need to end this class. And he's like, whoa. And and he totally was like, yeah, whatever we have to do, and your health. And I remember, um, later that night, students were calling, emailing, how are you? And it was horrible. And I felt bad that I had to do that, but also there was no option. Um, so I don't feel like I was letting anybody down with that, because I just simply couldn't go on. Um, but yeah, that was kind of a wake up call too, and the fact it was the first time in my professional life I could not will my way through something, a professional activity. Like I couldn't do that, and that was hard. Um, that really that just really hit like a ton of bricks. I mean, I was like, "Hey, you're mortal." Um, so, but I want to give the university, ample time so they can go out and recruit, because it's hard. They have a lot of turnover. People don't stick around and do this for 23 years. I am the anomaly. I'm the outlier. And also, people with a PhD from UW-Madison instructing you're just not going to find that unicorn. Doesn't exist in the wild anymore. Um, and so, they're gonna need some time to figure out what they're going to do. Um, and I want to be professional, right? And give them that time. And also, all of my materials, everything that I've built, is all there, so they can share that with whoever they bring in. So somebody should inherit a pretty good format. When I started, like that didn't really exist, and then everything that I've done now, I mean, I just built all of that, and it's pretty phenomenal. Um, so would I do this again in a heartbeat? Yeah, it was the um, intellectual um, Olympics for me, right? It was this completely ancillary activity that I could engage in that didn't have board meetings, and wasn't connected to all of these different requests and demands and things like this. it was high level cognitive thinking, but it was engaging in these the way that I could do these very vivid case studies, and we could dig into like case law and scenarios and how would you do this and happen and break it down. And then also like reading people. Like I got really good at reading the room and reading people and figuring out like who wasn't confident and building them up. And toward the end, I had activities in all my classes for advocacy. So I would look up current things that were in the legislative docket for Wisconsin or at a state level and say, if you were to testify for this or against it, like, what would that be like? And I've testified. So I would talk about my experiences. So I'm like, you're going to have 4 minutes. I'm going to give you some prep and you're going to testify for or against like driver's education being mandatory in schools, that schools pay and provide that, right? So do a for or against whatever you want. And there's a way to do that. Like you present and then you give like a personal story and then you like cite a fact and then the whole thing with a timer. And people have never been asked to do that before. And then they're doing this and everybody's applause and I'm clapping. And it's really good. And yes. So, I think I got really good at what I did. And yeah. So would I do it again in a heartbeat? I would do it. Is the future out there for new people to do this? I don't know. I don't know if these programs will survive anymore. I mean, I think schools, for example, and administrative programs are turning to what's called like these site-based things where basically, hey, like hang out with you want to be a principal? All right, like hang out with your principal like for a couple days and do some board meetings and do these activities and have the principal check off and we'll count it as a credit. My university doesn't do that, but I mean, there are movements in that direction because there are sharp needs, chronic churn in these positions. So like to get people in, they're going to lower the barrier of entry. So Z is saying, you're going to feel like a big weight dropping off of you. The hard part is letting it go. Let somebody else take over. You're right. I do. I already feel that the weight is off because over like to my left, I have all the materials I prepare for each class. Like for the class I'm teaching now, so I've got my course calendar, and then all the syllabus materials and all of that, and to prepare a class, you don't get paid extra to prepare the class, but it's hours, days, and then you're having to follow up with students. So if they get behind, right, and life happens to everybody, but then, I've gotten to the point where I'll just like pick up the phone and call them. I'll be like, hey, like I see like you haven't been posting or you submitted your stuff kind of late, or this doesn't seem as complete as it should be. And I've been more candid also over the years because I'm older and I've done this a long time and I know what it takes. And I think sometimes people need to hear that because there was a student who used this term like high leverage strategies or high leverage techniques, like just nonstop in everything she was talking about. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what conference you were at where this was talked about, but like nobody knows what that means. Like I don't know what you're talking about, leverage, right? These are just terms, and I think terms like that that people kind of grab on. Oh yeah, leverage strategies we're using. What does that mean? Talk about the actual strategies. What describe it so a parent or I can understand what it is, and just telling people don't get hung up on the jargon. One thing, like I have a PhD. I never use that as a hammer, like to say, well, I have a doctorate degree. I wrote the book for the class. Like I've published, and my papers are in ERIC and Kappa, and I've been cited. I have a Google Scholar page, right? Never did that, and that's where I think some people get lost too. As they go through education, is these programs and kind of these things. And like, just be relatable. Like, just talk to people, ask them. I think one of the things is if somebody moved to your district or start your school like tomorrow as a teacher or a student, like what are three things they need to know? Or what are three things you think they would observe in their first day? And you can just kind of get this framework. People like, I never thought about that perspective taking, right? But um, and I did a lot more exemplars or examples. And I would ask students. So, and I would tell my students. So I always had a notebook. It's in I have a backpack that's 23 years old that will always go with me to class. Materials in my lunch. But I had a notebook, and I would I would tell people, there will be times in this class when somebody or a group or whatever, or maybe I will do it. I'll say something or you'll say something that'll be so profound that it really should be written down and somebody should present this at a conference. Because I think there are so many awesome things that we talk about or we've done or whatever, or even like a presentation. I had a group do an allergy presentation. So I had a case study. It was a student, Bruce, and this was like maybe a couple of years ago, but I've had this case study and I've evolved it. He's going to enroll in your school. He has a severe peanut allergy as a second grader. So like, how do you prepare for this? And have certain like areas, like how are you going to physically prepare the lunchroom, but then how are you going to like train staff on the use of the EpiPen, and how are you going to educate other students, and also like books such as Taking My Allergies to School, so like second graders can kind of understand like why can't there be a peanut butter sandwich at Jimmy's table. I had a group that did such an awesome job on that assignment, down to the letter, like a short little letter that they would send home saying, hey, like there's a student that is now in second grade and has an allergy. So we're going to send them like a snack list and things, and we just appreciate your cooperation ahead of time. And I'm like, wow, that's really well done. And like a little staff training, like a 5-slide PowerPoint that they could do at a staff meeting and just have people ask questions. So, and I would say, is it okay if I use this for future classes? Like I'll leave your name at the top. I'll turn it into a PDF. And they'd be like, yeah, as a student you're really honored, right? So I would put some exemplars out there for people, and that's something too, like I don't see enough of that happening today, in K-12, in school leadership, of exemplars. For example, like 20 years ago when I kind of started at the university world, there were districts in the state of Wisconsin that were well known and that you would go to learn about certain things. If you're response to intervention, you're going to Monroe. If you're learning about professional learning communities, you're going to Hudson. So districts had become very good at certain things, and they were recognized for that. And we don't do that anymore. Like, and I think part of that is, well, if we recognize this district, then maybe there's a sense that some other districts aren't as good, right? So this whole default argument of saying, oh, like, right, if I say you're really good, well, then it means like someone else then has to be not as good, which is garbage. But I think that mentality exists. We used to celebrate the exemplars. So I go back to this notebook and said, I'm going to write this down. And at the end of class, I'm going to share like the things that we had that should be presentations that should be shared out. And I said, one of the things that would be extremely popular, and I used to develop and run conferences. But the conference stuff is kind of like run its course also. But I think if there was a conference run in the state with some state buy-in from the Department of Education, and all it was, which would be a lot, is innovative practices happening in schools right now, and have the schools come in and present about, here's how we started our esports team and we got students involved in this. Here's what we do for like allergy management at whatever school, and have this, and here's how we work with our local police department and whatever. I'm truancy. I lose my voice a bit. Low humidity down here, but nobody does that. And I'm like, how powerful would that be? Like I would go to that in a heartbeat, and these sessions would be packed, and people would be like, yes. So Zippy's saying everyone gets a trophy, no one can be better. Yeah, that's kind of the K-12 landscape right now. Is I guess, and this isn't a reflection of the university. This is a reflection of the K-12 landscape. Is if you do give out a trophy, if you do publicly identify a district as being very good at X, Y, or Z, whatever it is, right? It's that is almost frowned upon these days, as crazy as that sounds. But that was celebrated 20 years ago. Again, you knew the districts either formally or informally, and you would send staff to these districts. I remember going myself to learn about professional learning communities in Hudson, Wisconsin. I remember inviting staff to my district. We did an allergy summit and best practices, and just things that we had done, and showed the how we had set up lunchrooms and stuff like that. And it was like, but you've got to put yourself out there to do that. And that's where I would share these stories and tell my students of, hey, get together with your neighboring districts, and maybe you have something that you're really awesome with. Transition, getting students age 14 or older into the community. So, and come in and talk about that. Have them come in and show them the sites or whatever it is. Or you have like a 3D printing lab, right? And what you do with this 3D printing lab. I also said, I'm like, we still expect students to submit papers. There should be 3 options. You should be able to you should have a rubric, first of all. Like, I always push this. Like, I saw this in one district. There's a rubric-based district where they had a rubric, and then they would have samples of ways you could meet the rubric. I forget which district it was a long time ago, but it was amazing. And they would show what met the rubric and what didn't work. And students would then evaluate their own work. But you could do like a little video, or you could do a play, or build a diorama or whatever it was. But as long as it fit the rubric of your understanding of whatever concept, you're good. And you're on a radio show, or that you were doing a broadcast during World War II, right, or something like that. I mean, it was just unbelievable. Like, the students were not bound by the activity; they were bound by the rubric. And that was really a great way to teach. So, Zippy's saying merit died along the way. I think you're right on that. I think meritocracy was very big in school, was much bigger in schools 20 years ago than it is today, and in the classroom and how things are taught. Unfortunately, progressivism, everyone is the same, everyone is co-equal. Yeah, it is weird. It doesn't make sense to say this, but it does feel like when I bring these things up, with students, of like, you can be the district, which is da-da. They're hesitant kind of to do that. And you don't see it from up above. You don't see it from the Department of Public Education or conferences of saying, let's do like this innovative practices in the classroom conference. Hey, it's gunmetal guy, hey, buddy. It's gunmetal guy, hey, buddy. Da-da-da. Welcome. So there would be things I would talk about too, and I'd be really passionate, but then I'd also realize, like, this isn't the world anymore. This just isn't happening. It's not manifesting in schools. So that got to be a little hard too, because it was like, what is kind of my purpose? What is the knowledge I'm passing on to people? So yeah. Did I ever feel sad about this? I think I felt sad when I first started to think about this, which was maybe like 3-4 years ago. Because, well, here's something, like, when you teach, if you ever say no, you're risking not having that opportunity ever surface again. For example, like when I leave, like, I was with the university 23 years. I obtained a PhD. I got to the point where I was promoted to teach my own classes in 700 level classes. And you have to say yes to everything that's offered to get there. If you say no, like one time, that opportunity goes to somebody else. They teach it for 20 years and you're done. Um, so that was something too, is like you never would say no. And I never wanted to say no. But like doing this, it's not that you can reboot this. When you shut this down, um, that's it. It never turns on again. So that is the part that was a little bit of realism for me when I started to talk about this, more to myself as I was like walking. Is that once you turn, once you power down and exit, you're not coming back in because again, there are a lot of people, these positions that I like the position that I have, there are people who want that. I mean, because universities have been downsizing. Um, it's a pretty coveted position, even though there's been a lot of change. Yeah, so there will be people who will get into that, and it's not like I can come back in a year and say, "Oh, I'd like to return." It won't happen. I wouldn't do that anyway. But there is a finality in that. Um, And so I think, I think that was a part at the start that was a little sobering to think about. But at this phase, no, I've come to complete terms with it. I think there's this other part. There was this. I don't know if it'd be sadness, if that's the right term, but you realize you're getting older, and you're older than everybody in class. There was that point when maybe like 4 or 5 years ago when I was teaching those classes, like, whoa, suddenly like everybody in here is younger than me. And then like that just stayed that way, right? Um, so you start to see yourself of being like in a different phase of your life and your age and stuff like that too. And so yeah, I think there's something a little bit with that, but one of the things, like, if eventually when Doc's not around anymore, you know, um, what would I want to be remembered for, like a legacy? I think one of the things definitely would be my books and my university work. I think those are two sentinel uh, professional things that I've done. Professionally, what would I want to be recognized for? It would be those. Um, so and because I taught, 100 sections and so many people, there will be people out there just like I can talk about professors that I had, Dr. Redding, 30 years ago, um, Dr. Lanny Tabaldo was just absolutely phenomenal and just a high quality person, very impactful on my career and my trajectory. So um, there will be people who will hopefully will talk about me in that same tone. So I will appreciate that. Um, but yeah, um, it is going to free up. Like I said, it'll free up time, and I think it's going to be good for my health. When you get older, I don't know, you guys, but your energy level goes down somewhat. You just don't recover, like going from a Friday night, and, getting up at 4 a.m., setting up the driving and setting up to university at 7, and getting back home at like 7 at night. Like that would wipe me out for the next day, like over the last couple of years, where 15 years ago I could do that and be chipper and ready to go. And while it was still like energizing, still like do it, you just it takes longer. It's harder to do that. So um, and let me see. Did I have any like really memorable moments from a class? I think I taught a class in summer a few years ago, and there was a severe storm that was rolling in, and and everybody knew it, right? Because at that point, everyone has cell phones with like the radar on and stuff like that, and I remember the students being like, So what's the plan here?" It's like it gets really bad because we're like in the fourth floor of a 100-year-old building. I'm like, I don't know. Um, And when I drove home, and everybody drove home that day, it was the heaviest, unrelenting rain, the second heaviest I've ever driven through my life. But it was like unrelenting for the entire 90 miles home. It was just like a wicked downpour. So I was just like, whoa. And it was a weird thing because the night before class, I knew we could have storms and rain. I didn't know it was going to be anything like that. I went out in the garage and I cleaned my windshield and I applied like 3 coats of Rain-X because I'm like, oh, if I'm driving. And that like was a savior to have the windshield, the Rain-X on it, fresh coat of Rain-X. So yeah, I don't know if there were any, I really, when students would present or share and they did a great job and they knew they did a great job, that just was bucket filling for me. I mean, I just felt great about that for them. And I would, you tell people, like, oh, you did a great job with that. And people don't hear that enough. So toward the end, I got to be more real in addition to being real good, but of telling people like, hey, that you did a really good job with this, or, go back and tell somebody, or make sure you have a member check network. So if you're kind of really struggling in your job, that's something you can talk to somebody who is also in a similar type of position who can relate, and they can give you some honest feedback. And there is nothing that mandates that you have to stay in this position forever, right? If you make a jump into administration and you find out in a year or two it's not for you, then just go back and do, what you think is a better fit for you. It was very strange through the pandemic year or years because everything just focused on that. Class continued, so you'd come into class and people would be wearing masks. You have to sanitize everything, and all the desks would be spaced and cleaners out. But I remember shortly after that, the following year, like 2021, when I was teaching a superintendent legal issues class, that's when the Department of Homeland Security was saying, hey, here's how to report if people are being, I don't know, the word is threatening or whatever at board meetings. Like, here's how to report them to the Department of Homeland Security. We covered that in class, like the actual guidance, but it was like, if someone was vocal with free speech, not necessarily like they're making a threat toward you, and I said, so how do you interpret this? Because the way this guidance came out, you could refer a lot of people who are just like being animated through their 3 minutes at a podium. So there were a lot of very weird legal things that came up over the last 5 years. Long COVID. Oh my goodness. So in 2021, the Office of Civil Rights released an 8-page document for schools on how to evaluate and provide services for students who might have long COVID symptoms. So you go through this list and it'd be like foggy thinking, moody, itchiness, stuff. It was just like, how do you quantify this? Like, how does foggy thinking, what if that is just allergies that they have during spring because of whatever plant, right? So it was so vague that you could qualify almost anybody. But the thing was, then what do you do how do you mitigate this? Right? Like, there was no plan. And then schools didn't get extra funding. There's 2 sources: IDEA, Individuals with Disability Education Act, especially when there's 504, which is like access. So think of a wheelchair ramp so you can get in a building. But schools weren't getting extra money for this, so they're having to eval and do these plans for these kids to be referred and stuff. And 504 stuff, which is really hard under the long COVID, was just pretty ridiculous to try to deal with, because how do you identify sleepiness or foggy as being a symptom of long COVID versus maybe a dietary thing or again allergy? So it's So Ron is saying, you have a lot to be proud of. I've never sat in your classes, but I can say that over the years of listening to you here on YouTube, I've learned a lot. You're a top-notch speaker. You hold our attention. I appreciate that, Ron. I think my PBS presentations were also really well done and very authentic. Ron also added, and a naturally likable person you'll be remembered. So thank you. Yeah, well, I'm not going to disappear from YouTube. If anything, I might be back here more. But yeah, my university work fueled my PBS presentations. And when I gave my 2019 presentation, when I said, how do you want to identify yourself? I affiliated myself in that presentation as a faculty member with the university, which helped the university, right? I mean, it was good recognition for them, credibility for me in that presentation. So yeah, that was really, so there were just a lot of good things that happened in tandem that I was able to do. I think writing the books and also being a university faculty member gave me good standing to promote the books and to be on TV and to be interviewed for various, usually school safety things, which I don't do much of that anymore. It's very important, but there's other people who've taken the baton there. So referring to your university work, yeah, I appreciate that. You would have enjoyed the funnest class was Education Leadership 702. It's a superintendent legal issues class. So these are all aspiring or brand new school superintendents. And in that class, that's the one where I would bring in the drone. And then, we'd have the scenario of student is missing and someone offers this drone up to you, accept the drone or not. And that was always like a 50-50 split, which I thought was a real interesting observation over the years. But I wrote these amazing case studies, or I would find these issues that would go to litigation, right? There was a student with Dravet syndrome, which is a severe seizure disorder. Yeah, in California, this kindergarten girl, and the school wouldn't allow her in school because the physician had prescribed, I think, CBD oil drops under her tongue, sublingual. Now, the thing is, with Dravet syndrome, it's a very rare and very severe form of epilepsy. So basically, the school is saying I think they were afraid. North Rincon School, I think it was, cases out there, but we would go through it. And then little video clips that we did too, so you could actually see the girl. And they'd be like, we'll come to your house and we'll work with you. The parents are like, well, why can't she come to school? Well, and part of it, the school dug in and they said, well, we can't administer the CBD drops. It's against our policy. So of course we'd stop and everyone would look up their policies and what do you have for this. But eventually it went to court, and there are different circuit courts across the country, and the circuit court told the district, you have to allow this. The student has to be in. This isn't unreasonable. And the district, though, had some points. Like the district was saying, well, what if how do we know that CBD oil is legit? Like, what if it has THC in it, and if it's above, if you have THC and you're administering it. So what if your nurse is saying, I don't want to administer this because I don't know really what's in this, and what if it does have THC and I could lose my license? So we would go through these things, and ultimately, I would let students kind of battle that out in small groups. We would do the pros and cons, and then also the guiding principles. I always had guiding principles I wrote up on the board for every class. Best interest of the student. Actually, I'll show it right here. So these were a student made this mug for me. He's a superintendent right now, but back then he was just a student of mine. And I would write these principles up in the corner of the board every single class. Discretion, best interest, Board of Education policy, and induction. So discretion, who has discretion to make decisions? And you'll be surprised, a lot of people feel that they can't make decisions. They have to take it up the chain. Best interest of the child. There's no legal definition of that. When I wrote School of Errors or 60 Case Studies, Sefcovic and Bagley, researched in any way. So we talk about what is acting in the best interest. Board of Education policy. Know your policies. Right? What does your policy say? And also their policies are flexible. So like the girl with Dravet syndrome, like maybe you need to change the policy. It's a super sticker from Anthem, $2. My God, that is the first super sticker or chat I think I've gotten on my channel here in like 2 years. So thank you. I'm up to like $17 now. So well, I appreciate that. That's cool. There was 1 year I had like $104 in ad revenue, and I actually had to claim it on my taxes because I got paid out. But look at that. Anthem, who doesn't follow me on Twitter. By the way, if you're not following me on Twitter, my Twitter handle is safetyphd. Please do, because like I've lost followers. I don't know why. But if you do have a Twitter account, go in and follow me. Anthem, I'm following you, buddy. Anthem, but Anthem is not following me. He's down in the cave. Thank you, buddy. You got to get Aaron to follow me again. Aaron thought my account was hacked and he unfollowed me. And then I call him and I'm like, dude, like, what's up? He's like, oh, I thought you were hacked. And then he followed me, or I followed him back, but he never followed me. So I'm like, Rollo follows me, and Rollo has like 200,000 followers and follows like 200 people. And like I'm one of Rollo's. So, anyway, so I would have these guiding principles and we go through, and then I would be more direct in the last couple. I'm going to follow back. So thank you. I would be direct in the last couple of years, because then I'd just be like, here's what I would do and here's what I would do. And I'd be like, well, here's what I would do. I would have the student come in. I would meet with the local police. I'd meet with my SRO, and I'd be like, listen, we've got this girl. She has, get a letter from the doctor, but like if the state has a problem with it or whatever, we're going to fight that battle. And I would talk to my board of education, because like this is the right thing to do. And and the fact that they had data on this, right, that she was getting this medication, and also the CBD, and the CBD, the research was there. And there was a student, and her husband was a pharmacist, and she was saying, there's reasons not to do this. And I'm like, I get that. Like this is it's a gamble. You have to cowboy some of these things. And this I think the ad thing is on, so I don't know, just kind of defaulted to that. Sorry about that. But I'm like, you gotta, what is the right thing to do here? If this was your kid and they had a severe seizure disorder, but they rarely had seizures because of the prescribed medication and then also the CBD oil. The prescribed medication is basically a much stronger dose of the CBD oil. Why wouldn't you do this? And then like, oh, whatever, with our core policy. I'm like, then change your policy. So like some districts out there, I would bring up and look, I'm like, look, like they in their policy make an exception. If the school nurse has the authority to make an exception for medical, whatever, boom, do it. Like that's another thing. People kind of didn't realize that. I'd go through and like, all this stuff is pliable. And there are certain times you just need to do what you know is right. So look at this. Ron Wayne. This is raining cash down here. Oh my God, you guys is really cool. It's very generous, very nice. Thank you. That's really cool. Wow. Look at Anthem here. It says that he follows me. I'll have to check. I don't know if it does it or not. But look at Ron Wayne. That's really cool. I appreciate that. That's cool. So that was the point. And I think I later when I was teaching like the last 5 years, because I wasn't affiliated with a district, I could say things like this, just be really candid, and then just tell people again, what the right thing is. It's going to be very evident how you inform your decision. That was another thing we got into. Like I would always write that. How you inform your decisions is always more important than the decision itself, which sounds crazy. But the reality is, like, how you inform the people you're talking to, any research you're doing, what information you're gathering. If you make a decision and it turns out wrong, like if you're if you're going to cancel school, my dad was a school principal 36 years, and one of his duties was he had to make a decision whether school should be canceled or not. So he would inform his decision by either like getting out and driving himself out and seeing the weather, calling up the bus garage, doing both, right? Calling the police department. What are you seeing on? And then he would have his information, and most of the times it would be a call that seemed logical, but maybe by 9 o'clock that morning the temperature's warmed up and all the roads are bare, and people are like, well, why did they cancel school? Well, made the best decision he could with the information that he had. So that's the thing. Like, I always remember people. I always write that down. It's like how you inform decisions, because then if it doesn't work, and people, you're going to do things, it's not going to work out. But you say, with the information we had, or I had at the time, and have to make a decision, this seemed like the way to go. So there's no regret in that. And you have to get past that thing of feeling you made a wrong or a bad decision, because if you made an informed decision, it was the right decision. Right? And then people are like, oh yeah, so it's like how you inform decisions is more important than the decision itself, because if you are doing your due diligence with informing your decision, the decision is probably going to be logical, kind of like right. Doesn't mean, again, like that snow day thing. So, one of the things too is so I'm teaching class now, and we're talking about kind of the history of special education. And special education basically started in 1974. It was, it was Gerald Ford, PL 194 142, handicapped students in Schools Act. And I said, I was in school. I was in elementary school when that passed. And so next to our school building is amazing to tell people this, right? So you're talking to someone who's like 30 years old, and they've never known a time when special education didn't exist, or like that it wasn't something they were in school that it was very evident. Probably when I was in school, like at the start, there wasn't special education, and you had some students with disabilities who simply didn't attend school, like they went to special institutions for that. But I remember the school I went to. My dad was principal. K school. It was 100 years old back then. 4 stories tall, brick building. Next to the school was a double wide yellow mobile home next to the red brick old building. So it was a yellow mobile home. It didn't even match, right? But had a ramp, and never knew what it was. So we're talking like mid 70s, right? I'm an elementary kid. My friend John suddenly is gone for some classes. So I'm like, where did John go? And he come back, he had these awesome stickers. He like gave me a couple of them. Here you go, Dave. Whoa. And John went to the special education building. It was a place then. It wasn't integrated, it was a place. And he would be there, and whatever happened, whatever they did, right? And so special education when I was young was a place, and never understood what happened. Right? It was just the building next to the school, the yellow building next to the big brick school, and it was just kind of strange, because like you just didn't know. Like nobody came in and talked to you about it or what this. So it was just strange. Now my dad, there was a student named Mike, fragile bone disease, and Mike was an 8th grader, so in K building. So Mike, we're talking, let's pick a year. Let's say like 1977, probably pretty close. So Mike was Mike probably weighed like 70 pounds or less, and he was very small and fragile, very thin arms, stuff like that, and in this wheelchair. But even though like that was Mike, like because he was an 8th grader, the outside stuff, like you respected an 8th grader when you were younger. You're like 2nd, 3rd grade or whatever, 4th grade. Mike had a certain level of aura as other 8th graders he carried. The chair didn't diminish that at all. I always remember that. Like if Mike was in there and he'd be like, go down there and run to the stop sign and run back like to a kid, like they would do it. And he had no power to enforce that, but it was just also this interesting. I remember I'll get back to Mike in a second. Another friend of mine had a artificial leg. And again, we're talking like the 70s. And he came down the slide and he got up, he went up to the top of the slide. And before he came down, like his leg detached and it came down on its own. Everyone's like, oh my goodness, like, what do we do? And then just attach the leg back, right? So, yeah, so let's go over here. So, Zippy's saying special ed came around in 5th grade, mid to late 80s. We did not have much of it in Tennessee. So, yeah, where I was, 70s, and I remember. So when you're telling students this, like in class, it's just incredible. But I said, the upper grades, there wasn't an elevator in this 4-story school. So you had these flights of stairs. And Mike then, so my dad was the principal, and what he did is he found some of the stronger 8th grade boys, and they would literally grab one on each side of Mike's chair and lift him up the stairs, down the stairs. It was just like clockwork, smooth, but that's how it was done back then. You could never do that today, right? But that's how that was done. And you tell people this, you were creative, you did things, and there was something with that of being very organic and being very natural. Where now, I don't know. I think special education, and I'm very open with this, in class, and when I speak about this, I said I think it was very, very well focused at the start, and then it broadened out to a point where, like, someone was saying this to me like a week ago. Like, it seems like everybody has an IEP now, and I'm like, yeah, I kind of get that vibe for an IEP for behavioral, or to the point where like the IEP's lost the potency and the resources have been diluted. Like I remember, Mike. I don't know if Mike had an IEP. Probably didn't, because it was a wheelchair. Mike was a sharp guy, but there was a girl, Jennifer, who was a year younger than I was, had cerebral palsy, and she would have had an IEP for probably like physical therapy, maybe occupational speech. But I just remember when special education again was brand new. But we talked about this last week in my class, and I said, first of all, special education, which is a large part of what I teach at university level, has come a tremendous way in 50 years. And while we like to kind of maybe beat up ourselves and we should be better at this and whatever, I'm like, this is pretty amazing to go like from almost nothing to what we have now. It is amazing to have an iPad with a speech language augmentative communication program that a student can access and have it readily available. Where when I started as special education 20 years ago, you'd have to order a $4,000 called like a Dynavox, and it would be like the size of a pizza box. And, kind of think of a Stephen Hawking type setup. I mean, it was, and now so much of this is just native. I think one of the coolest things too is like one of my friends has a severe hearing loss, John, and he has his ear molds are all like a swirly color that he picked out or whatever. Guys like my age, and I'm just like, every time I see that, I'm like, that is. There's something really powerful about that, because for years, like hearing aid and all that was always made to look so you didn't see it, to blend in, to almost like hide. And now it's not that way. You can almost accessorize that, and like you can actually go for wheelchairs and like to have inlays on the wheels and decals that'll be made for like your favorite sports team, like your NFL team. And there's some really awesome stuff with disability influencers. Chrissy Marshall, who's hearing impaired. There's a lady, Sarah Todd Hammer, 24 years old, and she is an influencer, and she talks about disability access. In the university where she attended, she got, I don't know if it was a disability club, and then they also went around and did where you should have buttons to press to open doors. So I think with Sarah Todd Hammer, for example, and I shared out links on my class, and she's relatable. Like anyone that's young looks at her, she's similar age. She's very articulate, and she was, I think, 8 years old, had some type of infection. She tells her story where she was typically developing kid until like 8, and had this, and after that, ended up with some paralysis and some recovery with that and some not. So I think like with her left hand. And she also talks about accessibility as far as like clothing, and people send her, companies send her different stuff that she'll try for accessibility. But like, that is pretty amazing that that exists. And there's Chelsea Bear is a lady, I think like about 30, who has a mobility scooter that she calls Scoots. And she talks about, how when she named it Scoots, then she kind of felt comfortable going out in public. And the first time she like went to a movie on her own with her scooter and stuff like this. And there is something, as I tell students, I'm like, when I was a kid, if you saw, like I had a classmate, Pete, and Pete had a hearing aid, and Pete always wore a shirt with a pocket, because the hearing aid was like this, the battery pack was like this big, and it would sit in his pocket, like a larger carton of cigarettes, but like pack cigarettes. But anyway, it was like that big. So, and then this cord would run like up your shirt and like to the, so I mean, it was like very visible and stuff like that. And I never really kind of knew the whole thing. He was a cool guy, but like then to and get to today, where if you see somebody with a colorful hearing aid mold, or a wheelchair, or someone with cerebral palsy using a scooter, something like that, you don't think about it, right? I mean, they're just there, and they're doing, they're existing with you as you're shopping with Walmart, or you're eating somewhere, or whatever. Like, but when I was a kid, like that would be, it was a big attention draw. Not in I don't want to say it in a negative way. It was so unusual, and the equipment was so standard. It just stood out, right? All of this stuff. And then you had that phase again where instead of this kind of, as the equipment changed, they tried to make it so it would blend in more. So now, like, right, somebody loses a leg and you have the titanium going down. I mean, in the past, I would always like make an artificial plastic so it looked like a leg, but now a lot of people just have like the titanium coming down and there's like a shoe at the bottom. And if you see somebody like that, you're like, you just understand that's pretty amazing technology. It's pretty awesome that we're able to do that as a society, is to have these advancements. I know it's not ideal for that person, right? I'm sure if you asked them, they would rather have a leg, but a authentic leg, but they're not hiding this, and no one is, they sit next to you at a Brewers game. It's like, hey, so I remind people too, I'm like, there are really great things happening, but we also there's so many things getting diluted by like this long COVID and stuff that we risk, I think, losing the potency of kind of these services, if that makes sense. Zippy is going to bed. So let me go in and do a little bit of reading here in the chat. And I'm going to wrap it up unless Zippy drops a $400 super chat, which is possible. So Zippy's saying, 1 year I was in gifted and special ed at the same time. That's interesting. I've never heard that before. Definitely, this is Vanessa. Definitely, they determined I was mentally retarded. Oh my goodness, by higher definitions in first grade, if those docs could see me now. Yeah, you're a tremendous person, Vanessa. Very intellectual. Vanessa, my hearing is so tiny that I had lost their student's bike ride. I think that's something too. You point that out. I think, for example, like hearing aids, that whole push maybe in the 90s to make them super small and in the ear, but then like people had the actual users like had a hard time using them and putting the batteries in. And now, they're Bluetooth and the technologies there so you can charge, but also like the molds have gotten bigger again because they just fit better and they block out ambient noise. So, it was kind of like President Reagan had the hearing aid, but then it was the emphasis of, well, it's the, flesh colored in its way in, so you can't see it, like you're hiding it and not owning the ability. As I went through, like I had some I had some significant health issues in fall, and I was actually kind of, for the first time, kind of owning those versus kind of denying that they existed. But that's another thing too, is this reality with the hearing aids. Well, let's make the mold so it just is a lot more logical. And why are we flesh coloring and why are we trying to hide this? Let people do what they want to do with them. So let me go in. Vanessa saying, I never got the cool in my I don't know what that is. It's in my arm, just a bunch of metal implants maybe in the right arm. Okay. Sast. It's a good friend Sast. That guy. It's a warm weather guy. Well, Sast, after 23 years, I'm giving this up. I'm going to find a T-top Firebird and I'm going to try to cannonball across the United States and then Canada. That's my goal. So see you later, Zippy. Thanks for stopping by, buddy. So Vanessa, yeah, so that's an interesting point. As I talked to talking about students, and one of my students was saying, we have a student who wasn't wearing their hearing aid because the batteries were too small to get in. They didn't have like great dexterity and all of that. And then with the educational audiologists, they're like, well, we can go with a chargeable. I mean, there are options out there now, like kind of like a cell phone. You just set it on a thing. And then the other part was go with a bigger mold, so it's like just easier. That's what they did. I mean, so this is Sass. Drive to Florida. It's 83 here. Oh God, yeah. Man, oh man. That is, I am happy for you. It's been like in the 50s here, and I think it'll be like upper 60s. So like we've kind of crossed the threshold in Wisconsin to now have what's kind of decent weather. But yeah, I think we had like 150 hours of like below zero in January. I mean, that wears on you after a while. But yeah, it's funny because like I'll mention like to my mom, I'll be like, I would love to live in Florida. Oh, the heat and humidity. I'm like, I love the heat and humidity in summer in Wisconsin. So if it's 95, like we get 4 days that are 95 and it's humid, like I'm outside that entire time. So, but so yeah, I thought I was a very good instructor. I thought I was able to have a very wide range of experiences I brought in. And I thought I brought out really the best in my students. I think, that they enjoyed, they learned, they valued. And I was always very direct with people. I'm like, I'm going to push you hard to learn these things, right? Because you're going to encounter, it might be a budget thing or it's going to be some legal thing or whatever, but like, so you have a process, or like a student with a food allergy, or you're working with a student with autism and a parent or a teacher says, well, let's just have them stay home on fire drill day because it's easy. They get dysregulated and it's hard to get them back. I'm like, well, no, they need to be in school. We have to figure out a way to integrate them. And then also when I worked at the School for the Blind as the director of therapy for like 4 years, that was always the best job I ever had. Like every student participated in every drill. We had a 2-alarm fire on a Friday, like right at the start of lunch, and everybody got out. But that's an amazing part too that I can bring in and share with my students, because I said, you talk about reasons. You can get on this whole thing of like saying, well, there's reasons we can't do things, but I'm like, really, those don't exist on a lot of levels. I mean, maybe money, right, can prohibit, but let's say you can do these things. Like, you just do it. If it's the right thing to do, right, and you know it, then just make it happen. And once you lead, people will follow. So that was another thing too. And that never went wrong for me in my career, like to host food allergy summits, right? To require that we develop IEPs, practices for students with disabilities to participate in safety drills. Maybe it was so granular for a student that the first thing was that they watched a video of a fire drill, right? And the video they would watch, the goal might be that they watch 10 seconds of the video without audio, so they don't hear the alarm. They just see like the strobe on a video, so they know it's like. And then maybe the next part of the goal is that the audio is turned up to like a quarter volume. And then the next part of the goal is that you increase from 10 seconds to 20 seconds. And the next part of the goal is you actually go out where this is happening, and the student walks in the hallway as if the drill's happening with the iPad. So like, people don't think about this thing, but when you start bringing it up, they all know what to do. Then they chime in, yes, we'll do this, and then here's how we'll integrate, and this. Like, that's all measurable, it's all objective, you have a baseline, you move forward with it. But I'm like, no one taught you this. And we came up with this organically. And that was the one that we took and we gave it to FEMA, and FEMA uses it now. And I'm like, sometimes you just have to liberate people because they are just convinced the system doesn't want them to do things or won't reinforce them, or someone isn't going to have their back. And I'm like, just do it. If you know it's the right thing to do, then do it. And in most cases, it's going to work out for you. In the case that it didn't, you still did the right thing. So, oh my goodness. Look at this leprechaun. This leprechaun is talking. It's always like, hey, it's Ron Wayne. I'm like, I don't know, leprechaun. So that safety dock sign, by the way, it was made by Coop for me. And it has a couple LEDs which go like a different color where the leprechaun's hand is. And I don't know how to fix that, but I love that sign. It's just really cool. So, very wise methods. Yeah. So that's where I think, like, I know I was a very good instructor. And I know that you're telling people and giving them the permission to use their professional discretion. Inclusion and interaction is critically important from Vanessa. Yeah. I would bring in my own license too. And I would be like, this license from the Department of Public Instruction, I'm like, this is conferring upon me that I have the professional discretion to act in the best interest. I'm like, this is it. I also had an article. It's over here in the file cabinet, and I'm kind of get toward the end here, but it was an article I had. It was like in heavy clear plastic thing, almost like laminated. It was a newspaper article from 25 years ago, and then on the back, so on the front was this newspaper article, and then on the back was a letter. And let me tell you about that. So about 25 years ago, right before I started to teach at the university, and I use this with every university class I have that travels with me, and I use it. There was a small school district in Wisconsin of maybe 800 students, K-12, and that district had 3 or 4 high school students killed in a car crash. So, small district, devastating, right? That district was Greenwood, so there's no need to hide anything, but that district, small district, rural district, their superintendent called other districts, said, hey, if you have a school psychologist, counselor, you can come over and help us. And they did, of course they did. But also the local clergy team. So priests, pastors, right? The district had a complaint filed against it from, I think it was Freedom of Religion Wisconsin group. And the complaint after this instant, right, this tragedy, this complaint was saying that the school crossed the boundary of school and religion, like state and religion, by bringing in clergy. And I read the complaint and I was like, no, this is a very flawed way to view how this district access resources. So let's take away that clergy is affiliated with Lutheran and Presbyterian and Catholicism and all that. These are people who are trained of how to interact with people during grief. They are professionally trained in that. So in that capacity, when they came into that district, that is the service that they are rendering of no charge. They are there because these kids, these families are part of their community. They are there. And I wrote this article to the editor supporting the superintendent, who I'd never met. And I said that district was 100% in the right to do what they did. And this is absolutely ridiculous that they're challenged on this. So I have the article from the newspaper on the front. On the back is the letter the superintendent wrote to me. Didn't even know me. I don't know how he found my address, whatever. Wrote me a letter, handwritten letter, and he said, "Thank you. Nobody else." I mean, people here, I mean, we were frustrated, but like if you're just standing up for yourself, they're just like, well, they're being defensive and whatever, but you're the outside person who objectively looked at this. And when we saw this letter to the editor, like it moved mountains. Like it validated us, like, because we were getting beat up, by this kind of powerful organization, and we're like, what would we have done different? I'm like, you didn't do anything wrong. If it happened again, you should do the same exact thing. I mean, in the next district, the next site where this happens, this could happen anywhere, right? So, but I always use that. That was that part too, where I'm like, I could have been someone that could have been doxxed and gone after or called a lunatic or whatever because of but I'm like, what they did was right. And when you see people in educational leadership, right, or any position, but let's just say you see a superintendent who makes the right call on something like that, or makes the right call on making the high school gym available to families because there's been a severe storm and flood and there's been power out or whatever, and for some reason there's some controversy of, well, are we going to charge people for? I mean, stuff like this happens. Or the special education director who says, no, we need to allocate money and we need to buy a lift van because our students need authentic experiences. We don't need to set up a fake grocery store in a room in the high school. We need to get our students out so they can go and make their shopping list and go to the grocery store and actually get the items, and we can come back and prepare them, right? So these are the things where I get really passionate and just be like, you have non-negotiables, and sometimes you just got to put people in their place who are just out there kind of attacking because they're either uninformed or they just want to stir the pot, and it just isn't contributing, and it also is harming people, and people are already fragile and damaged in taking risk when they're doing some of these things like that superintendent in Greenwood. I'll never forget that. I have those things and I show them. So that'll be one thing I'll keep it, but I'll probably never use it again. But there'll be students who'll come back to me and be like, holy smokes, like they almost came to tears. And then I'd pass it around so you could read the article from, 25, maybe it's 30 years ago now. I don't know if, newspapers were real popular back then. And then you could see the superintendents you could see what I wrote, and then I think it was up above in the superintendent's note. I had it configured some way, but yeah. Anyway, it was just a really powerful thing. So, all right, well, guys, I appreciate all of you. Thanks you for hanging out, and yeah, thank you for the super chats. Yeah, that was fun. I appreciate it. Eventually, maybe I'll get up there and get some ad revenue, and it'll actually be a line again on my tax return. Hey, here was a Google payment, but that was. I appreciate that. I appreciate all of you, Ron, Vanessa, All Pro Leventon, Zast, our good friend, Zippy. So I'm going to hit the hay here. I'm kind of tired, but I'm glad I spoke about this tonight because I hadn't said anything publicly, and now I kind of wanted to talk through and listen to this myself. Talk through it again. It doesn't feel like a loss or anything like that. It's really a celebration, is what it is. Just the privilege of being able to teach 100 sections, and I think at one point I was saying, I think there maybe like 10% of all administrators in my state have had a course from me. Like at one point, like it was almost like that high. Like I was like, that's pretty awesome. That you have an opportunity to interact, and then people go off and can reference back to you. So it's a Lobo. Hey, buddy, our friend from Canada. I'm glad you're here. So terrific show. I appreciate that. Thanks, Sast. Thank you, Ron Wayne, the Kentucky Batman. Don't forget to test your accuracy on the like button. Yeah, I appreciate that. And our good friend Lobo, keeping things real in Canada. So have a good night. That's Misty Mrs. Wayne. You too, Misty Mrs. Wayne. And Lobo. So I used to have the thing where it could like snow and like all the effects, but that program doesn't boot up anymore with StreamYard. Actually, I use StreamYard now whenever I record fireside chats or little mini lectures. Like I used to use some other, I don't know, whatever program, but StreamYard has just gotten so good that I just do where it renders to the cloud and then I just download it. Like it's not a public thing, but then I'll download it and then I'll put it into the class, the Moodle class. So it's in a closed loop, like the public doesn't see it. Because I'll name students, but like I don't name like their last name or their district in case anything would get out. It's not like bad. I'll be like, shout out to like Pete for this and his district and stuff like that. That's another thing. Like I do these fireside chats, and you probably see them, but I name the students. So if you're in class, you hear your name, and I make sure that I recognize people at least 3 times throughout the various fireside chats over the semester. So no one knows it's you because I don't identify you by your district or your last name, but like it's you. And I think that's really important to be like, hey, this person shared and I thought it was really awesome. Here's why, and thanks for doing. And so, all right, guys, I'm going to take us out of here, and let me see if I have a good exit for us. So it's been so long. Hang on here. All right, why don't we do this? I don't want to make this one silly at the end, just because this is kind of quasi serious. Let me show you this was me in the recording studio. This was me getting. This is fitting. This is completely fitting. This was me getting the Professor of the Year award in 2022 at the university. So we'll play this as our outro. So thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Your good friend Doc. Thank you.
Faculty of the Year is Dr. David Harrison. David is a speech-language pathologist specializing in psycholinguistics. He's the author of The Velocity of Information, Human Thinking During Chaotic Times, and has been teaching in our educational leadership program for more than 15 years. Students in his superintendent's current and legal issues course share. Dr. Harrison is helpful, organized, and empathetic, with content knowledge that is off the charts. Students in this course also share that they consult with David as they navigate especially difficult situations in their own districts. Thank you for sharing your talents with our students, David, and congratulations.